Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. We are back for the new year. It's great to be back. Justin joining me via the satellite. How's it going, Justin?
Pretty dang good. New Year's was great. Can't complain about the holidays. And how was yours?
Oh, my Christmas was very strange this year because we did all of our Christmas stuff at least 2 weeks before. So it was more like Christmas month, I guess. And actual Christmas Day by that point, it was like, okay, I've already done everything Christmas. So, it was kind of all Christmased out, I guess, by that point. Of course, we had good food and all that still. So no worries on that front. But, it was just nice and relaxing. Went to Nashville to visit some friends. So that was fun too for New Year's. So.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. So, okay. So obviously a little bit has happened since we last spoke. December 23rd is our last episode. So we're sorry if you've been missing us. You know, we were doing Christmas things, I suppose. So we're back and we are going to start this week off with some All-Star snubs. As you know, there are plenty of them. And then we are going to do something a little bit more unique to the show, and that is to rank some broadcasters. So I don't know where I got this idea from seeing people say how much they hate Mike Emmerich. And so I thought, who would you rather have than Mike Emmerich? Because, that's fine. I feel like anybody who's a national broadcaster, people are like, great, it's Joe Buck again. Or like, great, it's Mike Emmerich or Jim Houston. People just tend to not like the national guy as much. Whereas, you hone in on some local guys or particular color commentators that you like. But so we'll dive into that as well on the show a little bit later. Before we do that, let's just jump right into these All-Star snubs. We're not going to go through every single roster on the 4 divisional teams. But we will go division by division in terms of our snubs. And so let's just start at the easy one. And Justin, let's hear your Atlantic Division snubs.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so first, let me just point out by saying that I hate the current format. I strongly feel like they should do away with the whole we have to have so many forwards, so many defensemen rule that this garbage that they have. I think you should just have a straight number of guys. Don't care what position they play, put them in. Let's go. I also wouldn't hate if they added 3 more roster spots to each team, but another discussion for another time. For me, when you look at the Atlantic Division, man, there are a lot of talented players, and honestly, you could literally just take Toronto and Tampa and be like, all right, just pick it out of a hat, and that's a snub. To be quite honest.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Marner and Point right there. There's your 2.
Yeah. I would much rather just watch a game between those 2 teams or just mix and match those 2 teams for the Atlantic and maybe throw in Jack Eichel and call it good.
Well, David Pastrnak does have, 25 goals or close to it at this point.
Yeah,
so definitely deserves to be there. And it's the goaltending that gets me. Is that you actually have 2 of the best goaltenders in the NHL, in Frederik Andersen and of course, why am I blanking on his name? It was Vasilevsky. There we go.
Yeah.
Kucherov's not a goalie, and neither of them can make it because the rest of their team is so good. So you've got Jimmy Howard representing Detroit, which is fine. He has had a really nice season for Detroit, but certainly not representative of the talent level at goaltending, and then Carey Price, the other goalie for this division. I'd say that's where, to me, okay, yeah. I mean, the 2 defensemen in this division that are going, Keith Yandel, I would say the last year, he has been very good. The last year. Like the actual calendar year. He's just been cleaning up. He's been very good. And Thomas Chabot is deserved of an all-star vote. But it just, I don't know, it has this weird feel where it's Keith Yandel's going instead of Barkov. Really? That's how it's going to be because we have to have these defensemen in there. I think Thomas Chabot would go for Ottawa either way. So I don't have a problem with that one. But the Keith Yandel, well, he has played well. I just don't see how Barkov doesn't go. And then the two goalies, I guess, are just kind of, well, the rest of the team sucks, so that's what you have to do. And that's actually kind of what has happened in most of the other divisions, too, as we go down. You'll see there are a couple of times where it's like, well, yep, they obviously had to have the goalie because there was no one else they were going to send. So anybody else, anyone in particular that you think should be on this Atlantic Division team?
No, I think we pretty much summed it up with Tampa Bay and Toronto there. I think those guys are more than worthy. Any one of those top 6 players on each team are more than worthy of saying, hey, let's throw you in the All-Star game there. But yeah, to second your point, I think too, when you look at a team like Detroit, for example, with Jimmy Howard, Dylan Larkin's had a good season. I think he's got 39 points in 42 games, which isn't terrible at all. It's much more than I expected him to have in terms of a point per game pace. But when you have other guys like Marner and, Braden Point missing out and you have Dylan Larkin in there, it's much, much harder to make the argument for Larkin over a guy like Jimmy Howard, I think.
Sure. And, the thing that is funny to me about the decision for the amount of players on these teams is that when you look at it, I mean, there's 8 players per team, right? And or is there 9? Oh,
9. No, yeah, they're going to vote one more in. They're the NHL.
Oh, one more per division.
Yeah, you get to vote in one guy each, so that way you don't get that write-in candidate where they have another John Scott moment kind of thing.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So okay, well, right now, yeah, I know that Morgan Riley's up for that 9th, and but yeah, I mean, it seems like you might as well just have 12 guys on a roster, and guys are out there for a couple minutes and they come off. I mean, it's you're not necessarily going to be super disappointed if you don't get a lot of ice time in the All-Star game. I mean, it just, I think you could tack on an extra 3 players like you were saying earlier, and it would be perfectly fine, and you'd get all those guys at the All-Star game, which is really what you want. I mean, you get all those guys in the skill competition too, which is more fun to me. But okay, let's go to the Metro.
More fun to me. That's great. What's funny too? I noticed that people spend more time actually arguing about who missed out versus what actually happened at the All-Star game.
Oh yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, the All-Star game. I watch it last. I watched the John Scott year, which was what, 2 years ago?
Maybe 3 years ago.
3 years ago. I mean, I couldn't say I watched it last year. I mean, I couldn't tell you who won. Let's go Metro. And who should be in here that's not? Actually, let's start here. Who's in here that shouldn't be?
That shouldn't be. I'm okay with pointing fingers right at Braden Holtby, to be quite honest. Not very impressed with his stats in terms, when you look at other goaltenders from this division, I think, you could easily throw in, oh God, who off the top of my head left?
Even Robin Leonard could be in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Braden Holtby. I mean, this is a name recognition over how well he's played this year.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think, obviously it sucks not having Ovechkin, him taking the weekend off. And I can't say I blame him. I think, he might need that little extra rest considering, what a run they had last year. And I think maybe he's anticipating a long run again this offseason. So,
I mean, but let's go here. You don't think that other guys in the league are anticipating a run? I mean, are Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler anticipating a Stanley Cup run? Is Pekka Rinne hoping to go to the finals? Is a Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson, are they hoping to go on a nice run with San Jose? I mean, all these teams, Kucherov, Tavares, all these teams are hoping that their team goes on a run. Let's just say this then. Maybe Ovechkin partied a little too hard over the summer, and he needs a break. It's caught up with him. Yeah. I mean, I personally, I think that if you're not willing to do this, then I don't think that it's enough to suspend you for a regular season game. I think that you should be suspended for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Wow.
You don't want to show up for, like, in terms of, I know I don't care that much about the All-Star game, but I appreciate what it does. As a kid, I love the All-Star game. I mean, I would.
Kids, this is for kids. I mean, this is essentially what it's really for.
Sure, and I mean, those kids are the kids that grow up to eventually buy season tickets and start podcasts about hockey and spread the love of the sport. And so, to me, I mean, this event is about sponsors. It's about kids. It's about going and having fun and watching hockey for those the host city, but then also for fans across the league who. I mean, the 3-on-3 is more exciting than it was in the past. And so, I mean, there's some draw to the game. And so to go, oh, well, I guess if you don't want to be there, you could just miss a game of the regular season, which Ovechkin, I mean, the only thing that does bug me is that, man, he's already got 30 goals, right, in 39 games. And the last time he did that, he had 65 goals. So, I mean, that is one less game that he gets to play to shoot for 60. So there's that. But I think that the consequences should be, oh, you want to rest for the playoffs? Okay, well, then we'll give you a rest for the playoffs. Suspended for the first game of the playoffs.
All right, fair enough. So for you, who's being snubbed? Who's missing? Who shouldn't be on this list?
I mean, this division is interesting. I mean, you do have, of course, the likes of Evgeny Malkin. I do think that everybody in here is deserved outside of, maybe you could say that Cam Atkinson is, I mean, he's kind of that guy who he has stretches of greatness, but has never, he doesn't put it together for seasons at a time. And so to me, he's the least deserving out of anybody in this division, where you could toss in a Malkin, you could have a Voracek, you could, who does New Jersey have? Oh, Taylor Hall. So
even Phil Kessel. I mean, 46 points.
Sure.
In 40 games.
Yeah. I mean, there's other guys that are at least as deserving. So, I mean, I won't say that I'm not offended by Cam Atkinson being in there, but who would you have in this division as the write-in or as the vote in?
Probably, I mean, so most likely you're going to see a defenseman. I don't know if they're going to adhere to that defensive 3-player thing, but I mean, I look at it, the big name off this list, and that's Artemi Panarin. That's the moneymaker. He's the big name, I think, not on this list outside of Malkin right now. Yeah,
what is the reasoning for Atkinson being in there instead of Panarin?
I think it's just he's got more goals, and that's pretty much about it. And he's a little hotter right now, and that's it.
He doesn't have more goals because of Panarin or anything. That's not a thing. Yeah. Okay, well, let's stroll on over to the Central Division, where goaltending once again. Here's actually the thing I forgot to mention in the Metro. There you have Henrik Lundqvist, the only player worth writing home about on the New York Rangers. So he's in the All-Star game. Same kind of goes for the Minnesota Wild and Devin Dubnyk. There you find him in there. Surprisingly, no Nashville Predators at the forward position in the All-Star game, though.
Yeah, I think if we had a healthy Forsberg all season long, we might be talking about him right now, but unfortunately not. Yeah,
I think not that he shouldn't be, that Ryan O'Reilly being in the All-Star game is fine. He has played well for the Blues, as well can go for a team that is definitely been the most disappointing team of the season. But the fact that Tarasenko, I mean, he shouldn't be in the All-Star game because he hasn't played like one this season, but it's that fact is that he shouldn't even be considered for the All-Star game is what is maybe most surprising about the Central to me.
Yeah, and two, he's the big name, right? I mean, if you're trying to sell it to the promoters, to the, the sponsors, Tarasenko's the name, I think, off that team that you want.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely not a bad thing that Ryan O'Reilly's walked in there and has become one of their better players. But yeah, you'd like to see him there, and none of the defensemen from them either. So I do like Miro Heiskanen in there for Dallas, making it over John Klingberg, and very strange that Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn not in here. Like, this division maybe is the weirdest one out of all of them, but you're certainly not going to hold off Rantanen and McKinnon. You have to have them in there, and Patrick Kane is the only thing. I mean, Patrick Kane's going to every All-Star game. Let's be honest. He's never not going to go because he's so fun. Like, he just has, I mean, from the first time he donned that Superman cape, he pretty much locked his position in the All-Star game for as long as he's at least pretty good.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I think, too, again, if we're talking, you don't have to have defensemen and forwards, and we're just talking forwards, then I think, we might see the likes of Sagan or Ben in here. But, yeah, I'm with you, too, on Patrick Kane. The guy is just – he's too much fun not to have in the All-Star game.
Is there who in here, who would you write in for this division?
Oh, I think maybe in this division I might. Boy, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. I think I wouldn't be upset about writing in maybe a Jonathan Taves or even a Michael Granlund.
Not a Patrick Laine?
You know what? He's cooled off lately for me, and I was still hoping he would end up being, the leading goal scorer. But right now he's sort of fallen off a little bit, and Jeff Skinner's the one who's playing hot right now, scoring goals outside of Ovechkin. So,
which is another guy who is not in the All-Star game,
right?
Jeff Skinner, who in a year where the maybe the team is determined a different way, he probably would be in there.
Yep. So yeah, I think those guys would be totally fine, and I think too if we had a healthy PK Subban right now, we might be saying his name. But because he's one of those guys too, again, that you just love to see in the game. He sells tickets. He puts sponsorships for the NHL in there. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think he's coming out with a TV show or something.
Is he really?
NHL Network, I think I saw. It's PK something. I don't know. But just as a little side note, I did predict. This just makes me so happy that Ovechkin is lighting it up right now, since I said I think he'll come back and he'll win the Maurice Rocket Richard Trophy, and he's been on fire ever since then. So
yeah, all right,
always fun when that happens, because I predict so much. I fail to predict so many things that when I do, I feel like I have to pat myself on the back for a minute. I mean, Patrick Laine, 24 goals still, but. Yeah, he to me is the one who should be in there. He is the most talented player not in the All-Star game outside of Mitch Marner.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the Pac division, the Pacific. The Pac. Obviously, Clayton Keller is in there because someone has to be, and in this case, I think that Arizona would have sent Mikko. They would have sent Antti Rantanen. But obviously he's hurt, and so Clayton Keller goes in his place, which it's not like Clayton Keller's been just going ham by any means, but he is good enough to make it to the All-Star game with his 8 goals in 40 games. Good job, buddy. This division obviously stacked with a Connor McDavid in there and Elias Peterson, who looks like he might not be ready for the All-Star game after they're doing an MRI on his knee. I don't know if you saw the play or at least the picture of him getting his knee buckled, but it looks pretty brutal as someone who has torn things in his knee. So
yeah, it didn't look pretty.
This division, the only division sending 3 defensemen as of right now, without the write-in.
Yeah, I'll be 100% honest with you. I would have been okay keeping Erik Karlsson off this list, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely there because of who he is, not because of what he's done this season. I think that's fair to say. And the fact that San Jose is sending 3 players is maybe a little excessive.
Well, I mean, the game is in San Jose, and that always typically tends to happen, which I can't. I hate it. It drives me nuts.
That's true. I mean, I think that, I don't know, 2 should be good enough.
Yeah, I think so. You got enough personality for 5 people in Brent Burns. Let's just be honest about that.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. I mean, I also think when you look at the Kings, Drew Doughty's going. I mean, he's been fine this year. You could kind of handpick either him or Kopitar to go, and it's just kind of probably dependent on who else is going to go from the division. So that's why he ends up there. John Gibson is probably the most worthy guy on here, along with Johnny Gaudreau, to be in the All-Star game. And then Marc-Andre Fleury has been fine. Vegas has certainly been much better than they were early on in the season, and so there's a few guys that could go for Vegas as well. I don't think that you can really say, oh, well, they don't have any forwards worthy of going to the game. They are second in that division and look poised maybe to take Calgary for the top spot again in that division after winning 4 straight. And so Vegas has really come on strong here. So for them to only send one might be a little bit of a, maybe the fact that they're a younger fan base and the league doesn't expect them to maybe get watched as much for the All-Star game from Vegas, that they kind of throw in a couple other guys instead. But who would you have in going instead of, or who's your write-in candidate for this division?
Honestly, probably 2 guys here. I think one, if you want to keep it, at home, the hometown guy, Logan Couture would have been a good write-in for me over, a guy like Erik Karlsson to go. But I think outside of that, a Sean Monahan would have been will be a nice choice. Hopefully, maybe he'll get the write-in. We'll see, but I would like to see him there.
Okay. Yeah, I would, I'd probably put up like a Jonathan Marchessault as a guy in a 3-on-3. That's the other thing, is that you got to think who's awesome at the 3-on-3. Like, to me, when I look at Brent Burns in there, I don't necessarily think, oh, there's a guy that's going to dominate 3-on-3.
Well, if you want to, if we're going to do 3-on-3, then you got to throw in Leon Draisaitl with Connor McDavid at that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. It would be nice to have those two playing together since they have so much experience together. So, okay, well, there's our All-Star snubs. Who is your, out of all those, who's the one guy over anyone else that you want to see in this game?
Out of all 4 divisions.
All 4 divisions, just one guy.
Ooh, honestly, he's not a write-in candidate, and I would love to see him more than anybody else. Would be Mitch Marner. Honestly. All right,
yeah, he'll. It's crazy that he's not even on that list to be a vote-in.
Yeah, he's
just crazy.
Probably one of the top 3 most gifted offensively players on this list right now. I think so.
Yep. And Matthews said I would give up my spot for Riley and Marner. And I wonder if that's more because he just doesn't want to have to go.
Maybe Matthews gets a little cough and gets a little sick.
Right. There you go. Well, okay. So there's our All-Star snubs. Let's shift gears here. We said in the beginning of the show we were going to do some ranking of broadcasters. And so if you are, if you watch games from around the league like us, you get exposed to all different guys, and certainly for me, when I see 2 teams playing each other, who the broadcaster is definitely plays a factor in which feed I'm going to watch, right? Like, if I know that, I'm trying to think, like, if Buffalo's playing someone and I'm going to watch the game, I'm probably going to watch that Buffalo feed, because Rick Janneret is so entertaining to listen to that I feel like I'm required to listen to him just go off on a game.
There you go.
So, okay, well, let's how did you come up with this ranking? Now, these rankings, we're just doing top 5. We're just going to keep it simple for now, and we're throwing color commentators and play-by-play guys all into the bucket. We also did an overrated and most underrated. My overrated and underrated weren't on my top 5. So how did you come up with your top 5?
Mostly just like you did. I think, I look at guys when I hear playback or, play-by-play of these announcers, like especially when they, had the big save or the goal that, the overtime winner in the playoffs or something. When I hear these guys announcing it, whether it's the color commentator or the main, commentary guy, it's just it gets me jacked. It gets me pumped, little goosebumps. Like, I love it. So, and then of course I kind of put in a little, dash of, the nostalgia, guys you grew up listening to, guys I've been, watching for a long time, and longevity played a little part, but for the most part, it's just, who got those goosebumps going.
Okay, so kind of an emotional response to particular calls with guys.
Yep.
I did include some of that. Some of my choices were based on the emotion that they bring about. Also, some of it was how in depth they're going to speak about the game. So, no offense to Florida Panthers fan that is listening right now. The broadcast in Florida tends to be lacking, a lot of depth, because understandably so, and it's not, I don't have a problem with it, but in some ways you're teaching some people the game. And so, not to say that they don't go in depth sometimes, but the guys I chose are guys that they really find those minute little details that are interesting to listen to as somebody who watches a lot of hockey. Things that, sometimes I notice them, sometimes I don't, and it's nice to get that advanced level hockey knowledge in there. So that played some of the factor into mine. So before we do the top 5, let's go underrated, overrated. Justin, why don't you start with your most underrated broadcaster in the league?
All right, underrated. I'm going Ray Ferraro.
Okay, he's your underrated. Oh, he made my list.
Did he? Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, he made my list. But yes, I would. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he doesn't get enough love, I don't think, when you look at it from a national standpoint. I think people in Canada know him, but in America, he doesn't get a lot of love.
Yeah, because he's more on the TSN broadcast. So
right.
Yeah. Mine is actually going to surprise you, I think, but it's Ken Daniels, Detroit Red Wings play-by-play guy. Yeah. Unfortunately, he has to sit next to Mickey Redmond, so it makes the broadcast virtually unlistenable. But when Mickey Redmond isn't getting off to watching Red Wings jerseys skate around the ice, Ken Daniels does a fantastic job at describing what's happening on the ice. He stays just impartial enough to where it's acceptable. There, of course, any regional broadcast or like a local broadcast is always going to have a bent towards the home team. I have no problem with that. But some guys are just so over the top that it can drive you crazy, which isn't always a bad thing, but it can be. But Ken Daniels does a good job. He certainly has to to undo some of what Mickey Redmond does on a regular basis. So who's your most overrated guy?
You just said his name, Mickey Redmond.
Okay.
I cannot stand him. He drives me nuts. And every time he opens his mouth, all he wants to do is talk about how good the game used to be and what used to happen in my era. And I don't know how he keeps getting re-upped every single year by FSN Detroit, but they keep putting him in there, and it drives me nuts.
Well, the reason why is because what happens with these broadcasters, they aren't actually employed by Fox Sports Network or by, whatever network you watch your team on, right? Those broadcasters are employed by the team. So he is the Detroit Red Wings like TV broadcaster, and then Fox Sports owns the rights, and so they get to air them. So
right. Yeah, so they actually list them on their actual Detroit Red Wings website.
Right.
Funny.
Right. They are employees of the Red Wings. So it's the Red Wings that keep on hiring them back, which who knows why, but I know a lot of people love the drunken SOB, so we'll let them continue going down that terrible path. My most overrated broadcaster is Jim Hewson.
Jim Hewson, okay.
Yes, the Hockey Night in Canada lead guy. I don't know what it is about it. I just can't. I used to really like him. So back when NHL with EA Sports, when those games first started coming out, and once they first started coming out with broadcasting, like play-by-play, it was Jim Hewson and Bill Clement. I don't know if you remember that, but so Jim Houston was the guy on there, and it was great. I mean, I always remember. I think he used to do like the Vancouver Canucks. I think was the team that he started with, right? So, I liked him then, and I think as he's gained in popularity, he has. I don't know. It just feels like he's a little douchey. That's and the things that he talks about. I never really feel he describes the play. It's nothing to do with that, but anything in between the play, the things that he has to offer up, just don't really hit the nail on the head for me. So yeah, for that reason, I just think there's so many better broadcasters that he just kind of is another guy to me. He has a great sounding voice, but that's about it. Okay. Well, shall we do this top 5?
Let's roll, baby.
Okay, who's your number 5?
Number 5 for the St. Louis Blues, Darren Pang.
Ah, the Panger.
Yeah, I enjoy his insight. Very knowledgeable, but when he makes calls for big-time goalie saves, it gets me jacked every time. And, I actually enjoy listening to him commentate.
You like the holy jumping.
I do. I like it.
Lots of holy jumpins. Well, my number 5 is definitely the most unexpected name that I have on my list. I was unsure whether or not to put him on here because he is very homerish, and I actually don't like him, but I think he's fantastic. And so for that reason, I'm putting the Boston Bruins' Jack Edwards on my top 5. He's my 5. The thing that put him over the top, if you go onto his Twitter, he'll release he puts out all these game notes before the game, and they're great. I mean, he just does great statistical analysis and gives you a picture into what he uses to broadcast the games. And so I think that's a really fun and just engaging way to reach out to fans. And so I like that, and I also like that he pisses everyone off. So I'm cool with that. You're number 4, sir.
Number 4 from the Florida Panthers, Steve Goldstein.
Okay, yeah, good old Goldstein.
Yep. I enjoy his Goldstein-isms, if you want to put him that way. The guy is rock solid, I think. While he might not give you the insight to the game as much as some other broadcasters, he's rock solid, and I thoroughly enjoy listening to him.
All right. My number 4 is Mike Johnson of, I don't know, TSN and NHL Network or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always love his he has really good analysis on not just what's happening on the ice, but what's happening behind the scenes, and he seems to have a lot of really good connections, and he makes very logical and deep reasonings for why maybe he thinks a certain way or what is going on with a particular team, whether they're succeeding or failing at the time. Just always seems to have good insight into what's actually happening in the game. So I appreciate that about him. Let's go your number 3.
Number 3, maybe the gold standard, I think, for a lot of broadcasters. And again, I kind of just chose his name because there's so many guys on TSN, I think, that really I could have put on this list. But Gord Miller, for me, comes in at number 3.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Gord Miller is on my list as well. I remember listening to him during World Juniors back in the day. And I always was like, man, why isn't this guy doing more NHL games? And now, of course, I think he does a lot of Ottawa games. But yes, he does work for TSN. So, Gord Miller, another very good play-by-play guy for sure. He actually is my number 1 for play-by-play. He's some nostalgia in there, listening to him for a long time, but yeah, I like his analysis. But my number 3 is actually Rick Jenneret for the Buffalo Sabres. Gotta love his. I mean, he has some of the most infamous calls of all time in the NHL. On top of that, just he makes the smallest things sound thrilling. So I just always can get up for a game broadcasted by Rick Jeanneret. Even when the Sabres are bad, he always finds a way to entertain. And fortunately for the Sabres, they're not bad. So,
well put.
Who's your number 2?
Number 2, the homer pick here, Ken Daniels. To me, again, like you talked about, a guy who is pretty impartial when it comes to commentating both sides of the puck, and love listening to him. Even when the other team scores, he still gets a little excitement in his voice, right? He still kind of dials it up a bit for him, which is always great to hear. And then there's a reason too. You always see his name, as like the sub-in guy for NHL and NBC. When one of their guys are sick or somewhere else, they'll always call him to come in and commentate, just because he's so good at it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And he's been doing it for a long time now, so definitely up there. I don't know if I'd have him as my number 2, but that's okay. You're allowed the homer pick. That's all right. My number 2 is Ray Ferraro. Like we talked about earlier, just great insight. And my favorite call of his is when Patrick Steffen for the Dallas Stars is going in on an empty net. And, of course, he misses. Puck gets turned over and sent down the other side of the ice. Ryan Smith scores a goal to tie the game. And Ray Ferraro's analysis of the play was, Patrick Steffen, you should be embarrassed. In my 20 years of hockey, or 30 years of hockey, I've never seen a more disgraceful play. And just rips, like he just goes, there's no black and white to Ray Ferraro, there's no gray, there's only black and white, and so he goes for the throat, and I find that entertaining for a business that tends to be very PC. I think he's maybe the least PC out of any color commentator, so I appreciate that about him. So I already said my number 1. It's Gordon Miller. Who's your number 1?
Already on your list, but a Rick Jeanneret.
Oh, okay. Rick Jeanneret, number 1. No love for Mike Emmerich here on this list, eh?
Yeah, no, he's all right, but, I would much rather see any one of these 5 guys that I mentioned here. Even Ray Ferraro. Would love to see him instead. Yeah,
it's funny when it comes to Mike Emmerich and Jim Houston. Like I said, the national guys just tend to kind of get no love. It is probably, though, one of the harder jobs because, you're not doing the same teams every time, although some may argue that all Mike Emmerich does is Chicago games and Pittsburgh games. But, you do have to know everyone across the league. Not that you don't when you're a broadcaster for another team, but I'd say that there's got to be, because you're not with the same, you're not, if you're the San Jose Sharks broadcaster, you naturally know everything there is to know about San Jose, and you have to learn one other team, whereas for these guys, you've got to learn both teams on a consistent basis. So I'll say that it maybe is harder to go in depth sometimes with those teams because you are on the outside. You're just coming in for individual games as opposed to following a team around all season long. But I just think that that's where maybe there's been a mistake in how the NHL and NBC puts out broadcasters, is that maybe they should be using more local broadcasters or like a regional broadcaster for games when they want to make them national. Instead of having to have a Mike Emmerich, why not have one of the, have the color guy for one team and have the play-by-play guy for the other team and have them work together? It could be fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, if it's Jack Edwards and someone else, it could turn into a fist fight, but who knows? So, all right. Well, that is our show for today. We, if you hit us up on Twitter, we have been tweeting despite the lack of episodes lately, but we're back on track now, and so we will be coming at you early next week. But hit us up on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Next show, we will finish out our series on the worst. We'd been going through the worst center depth, the worst winger depth, and worst goaltending depth, and the only one we haven't got to yet is the worst prospects depth. And so we'll hit that up along with whatever else is going on in the league. And if you have any other ideas for us or any questions you want to ask us, just send it on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, enjoy your weekend. Any last thoughts?
No.
Okay. All right. We'll talk to you guys soon.